Hello and a very warm welcome back to Autism Unpacked. I'm your host, Rosie Gilmoss. Throughout this series, we're going to be hearing about the many facets of autism. We're going to be speaking to experts and those with lived experience. So whether you're a parent on this journey with your child or simply curious, I'm here to have the big conversations and get you the answers that you need. Today, I'm joined by Karen Broomhead, a lecturer in special educational needs and a mother of two. Karen's daughter Lois is 9 years old and has complex autism. In today's episode, we're going to hear from Karen about what it means to be Lois's mum, the trials, tribulations and the celebrations. I hope to be able to share with you today what it really means to be a part of Lois's world. Welcome to the podcast, Karen.
Thanks
so much for coming on today. It's lovely to meet you.
No problem.
So I guess, would you start by telling me a little bit about Lois? Tell me about your family and what she's like and how the family dynamic works.
Yes, of course. So I, as you've said, I'm a mother of two. I've been with my husband for nearly 20 years. And
Congratulations.
thank you. And we have two children. So Lois is our eldest child. She is 9 and she is autistic with high support needs. And we also have Rory, who is 7 and he is neurotypical. And I suppose what's quite interesting about our family dynamics, or kind of our family history, I suppose, is that before we had our children, myself and my husband were working within the area, I suppose, of autism.
Okay.
So I obviously was, still am a lecturer in SEND, and my husband was working as a sports coach, developing activities for neurodivergent children. So we were doing that, just really enjoying our work, and then surprise, we had our own neurodivergent child. So it's been quite a journey to get to the point that we are at now. And I would say, yes, we have a different family life, and that's because of Lois's, or partly because of Lois's complex needs, really.
And because of your background, were you able to pick up on signs that she might be autistic earlier than you perhaps may have?
Yes, I think so. I think that's definitely part of it. So just as kind of a bit of background, Lois received a diagnosis of autism just before she was 3.
Oh, wow, that's
yes,
very young.
It is, it really is. And I think there were several reasons for that. I think, firstly, we noticed, because of our kind of background working with autistic children, we noticed that Lois was displaying behaviours and traits that we'd seen in other autistic children that we'd worked with. So Lois was very content by herself. She was very in, her own little world and quite happy being there. She had no speech at that point. She wasn't interested in her little brother who'd just been born. All of these kinds of things added up. And I suppose our light bulb moment was I took Lois to a music class when she was 2. And there were, say, 20 children in the room, shaking maracas, watching the leader do all of the songs, singing Wheels on the Bus. And my child was the only one in tears, banging on the door, trying to escape.
Trying to leave.
And it was literally at that point, it was just, Lois is autistic. There is no doubt in my mind about this. And so, went home to my husband and he was like, yeah, actually, yes, I see what you're saying. So then we went straight to the health visitor, who immediately referred us to the paediatrician. And we were probably in a room with a paediatrician for about 2 minutes before he was, completely on the same page as us. And obviously there were other elements to that. So there was input from speech and language therapy, input from her nursery and so on. But it was very, very clear at the age of 2 that Lois was developing differently to neurotypical children. So we used to think, maybe she was diagnosed so early because we were really tuned into autism. Actually, now looking back, I think her needs were so evident that was probably why. I do say we were lucky in this respect, that we were able to identify certainly traits or different behaviours, I suppose. Like you've said, Lois was my first child, but I think it was just so evident. The speech delay as well was very clear. We weren't making any progress with kind of personal care, and so that resulted in a very quick diagnosis, to be honest. We received a verbal diagnosis at 2.5, where that first meeting with the paediatrician, and he said absolutely, autism with significant speech and language delay. And then he said, let's just, leave it a few months before we absolutely put it down on paper. And then, just as she turned 3, it was like a rubber stamp, that written diagnosis of autism and significant speech delay.
And how did you feel as parents when you firstly got the verbal confirmation and then that paperwork?
Yeah, so I think I'll be honest, and it's okay to be honest, because this is taking you on a different path. My initial reaction was, it felt like a punch in the stomach. It really felt like, oh my goodness, someone has just said Lois is autistic. And although I knew, of course I knew, it really was challenging to hear. But I really want to be clear, I wasn't upset that she's autistic. I've never been upset that she is autistic. I was upset at the thought that she was going to have a battle just to be understood, that she would probably have to fight a lot harder to succeed in a world that isn't designed for her. And so that was really why I felt the way that I did. Those early years were so, so hard, when you are still in that state of comparing your child to other children. What is it? Comparison is the thief of joy.
Yeah.
But when you're in those trenches of, oh my goodness, this life for my child is likely to be very different. And although, of course that's okay, but it's because, society isn't designed for neurodivergent children. And that was really where it was so hard to take, that I thought, we are going to have a lifetime of her battling just to be understood for the wonderful child that she is. But there was also relief, huge relief. And, to receive a diagnosis so early really was beneficial to Lois, and has been so beneficial for, where she is now. And I know that that's not the case for so many parents. So it was a huge relief. It meant that we received the diagnosis, and she was essentially at nursery by the age of 2.5 with a full-time one-to-one to keep her safe and other children safe. And again, we haven't had to fight for an EHCP. We've had to fight for a meaningful EHCP. Wow. That's a completely different story. But the actual process was very straightforward. And, I think that was partly because of the complexity of her needs. And also, this was 7 years ago.
Yeah.
So pressures have changed considerably since then.
So day to day, what's family life like? Because you mentioned that you have another son, Rory, who's neurotypical.
Yes.
So I'm just thinking now, as I've got 4 children myself, so I like to drop that in so everyone feels sorry for me. And 2 are neurodivergent and 2 are neurotypical. So always you're sort of being pulled in different directions. Now, both of my children are what is rather uncomfortably called high-functioning autistic, which is a term nobody enjoys, but their needs aren't particularly complex. My son was diagnosed very young as well. And I'm just wondering how you manage that, because you've got 2 children that need you, and obviously you want to try and provide, in inverted commas, a normal childhood for Rory, but protecting Lois from overwhelm and overstimulation.
Yes, that is incredibly difficult. I think the mum guilt is most fierce when I think about my 2 very, very different children. So, as we've mentioned, Rory is a neurotypical football mad 7-year-old who wants to be out with his friends, wants to go to lots of social events and things. Lois is 9 and has very different activities that she enjoys. So just kind of a little bit of background about Lois. Yes, she has this primary diagnosis of autism, but she has very high support needs. So she requires all support for her kind of personal care and continence from myself and my husband. She has significant learning difficulties. She has ARFID, so avoidant and restrictive food intake disorder. She has associated medical conditions, so she's got an underlying thyroid condition and so on. So they are 2 extremely different children. And that is really hard because, so for example, there are places we simply can't go as a family. We can't go to, social events. Not that I really want to be perfectly honest. But if we wanted to, we couldn't. We couldn't have large family parties, or we couldn't, go for a meal out, for example. Yeah. With Rory, we can't have his friends round to the house because that's not something Lois would manage at this moment in time. And that's okay. That's no one's fault. That's not Lois's fault. Every family has different personality types. They have different tolerances, and that's okay. But it is hard to try and balance that. It's also hard in terms of I have to have eyes on Lois at all times. But sometimes Rory will really want to show me something. He might want to show me that he's won his video game, or he wants me to talk about his favourite footballer. And that's really hard to kind of give him my attention when I have to keep a watch on Lois, essentially. But that sounds all doom and gloom, and it isn't doom and gloom. It's real life. It's just probably slightly different. But I do think in terms of siblings, we have a lot to learn from the siblings of disabled children or neurodivergent children in terms of acceptance, that genuine acceptance of a child for who they really are. I've never met, a more caring little 7-year-old than Rory. He's a big brother in many ways because he'll be fetching me nappies and wipes to change Lois. He'll be helping her put her shoes on. And he's only 7, So I think it's really important to, I know it's easier said than done, but to get that time with the sibling by themselves. And there are avenues to do that, like direct payments, for example, accessing respite for your neurodivergent child or your disabled child, in terms of can they go and do activities that they enjoy while you can spend some time with the sibling, and also reaching out to kind of young carers as well. So Rory is recognised as a young carer. And he loves, so it's Cheshire Young Carers in our area, and he absolutely loves going to those activities, over school holidays, that he can just be a little 7-year-old. He doesn't have to worry about Lois while he's there. And also I think that, acknowledging that all feelings are valid, that sometimes it's really hard to be a brother to Lois, and that's okay. It's probably really hard sometimes to be a sister to Rory, it can be challenging. And I think kind of promoting that space to talk, really. So it was really funny the other day. We were having a really rough morning with Lois. We hadn't, no one had slept. Her behaviour was particularly challenging, and I know she was having a tough time. We were also having a tough time. And I was taking Lois to school that morning, and Rory turned and said, "Oh, that was a lot, Mum. Good luck." And I was like, actually, it's great. You can love your sister for absolutely who she is, but you can also say, sometimes this is really, really hard. And I think for a 7-year-old to recognise that is really quite great. So yes, it is challenging, but I think you can find a way through.
And is that something that you do? You'll make time just for, say, Rory, or you and your husband and Rory to go and spend a day doing football-y things?
Oh, absolutely. So we really, are very grateful to direct payments, as I mentioned, where Lois can have a personal assistant for a few hours a week who can take her out or, do something with her, because Lois really does not like standing on a football pitch.
I'm with Lois on this one.
I know. I mean, do I as well? So, that's a way that we can really dedicate some time to Rory, that he gets our full attention, whether that's playing his football match or playing, a video game at home, that it's just that it's quality, I suppose, quality time, isn't it?
And I think also a lot of it is to do with understanding, because for a child of 7, a lot of parents maybe wouldn't explain why, but it would just be, well, these are the rules and you must do them. But if you explain and you express that Lois's needs are sometimes higher, but there is still time for you, then that fosters a greater understanding within the family as well.
Yes, absolutely. Generally, he'll just be like, well, that's just Lois, like, that's okay. So I think for him, this is just typical life.
Yeah.
And he embraces that, just as I suppose any other sibling would in terms of their brothers or sisters.
And actually all these siblings of neurodivergent children who are going to go out into the world more empathetic, more understanding, more tolerant, they're going to be the people that make the changes in work environments because they understand.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. Like, this is what I mean in terms of we have so much to learn from them. We really do. I think there's so much that they can tell us. There's obviously so much that neurodivergent people can tell us, but I think, that the siblings of neurodivergent children and young people, particularly those who are perhaps pre-verbal or have limited communication, I think that is another opportunity to be an advocate for those people. To talk with them. So I always say, obviously I'm an advocate for Lois. I'm not her voice. Like, I will talk with her rather than for her. And I think that's kind of an extension of siblings as well, really.
Tell me a little bit more about who Lois is, because I know when we spoke prior to this, you were adamant that you did not want this to be a pity party. You wanted to be able to celebrate Lois and who she is. So tell me a little bit about, what does she love doing? What makes you proud?
Yep, so absolutely. Firstly, like you said, this is not a woe is me or woe is Lois. Lois is absolutely who she is meant to be. And she is the most wonderful child. Genuinely, honestly, she is such a character. So when she lets you into her world as she knows it, she is the funniest, giggliest little girl you've ever met. I can't talk about Lois without mentioning Peppa Pig. Sorry, I've got to. Peppa Pig is everything to Lois. Books, toys, watches Peppa, reenacts Peppa constantly, and which is obviously very different to a neurotypical 9-year-old girl. So Lois's highly focused interest is Peppa Pig, with maybe like a side of Mr. Tumble or a bit of Teletubbies, but those kinds of programmes really, she finds them really, really enjoyable. She, obviously, as I've said, she does have learning difficulties. She does have challenging behaviour, which means that we have to, or want to, have a kind of a low demand environment at home and at school for her. But to just really, to try and get across who Lois is, I would say she is unapologetically herself. So there is no masking with Lois. Like, if she was here now, she would be causing chaos. She is just this wonderfully carefree child who is so comfortable being herself. This is Lois's world and we're all just living in it, honestly. She is such a character, and I am so proud of who she is. And I don't share our story for pity or for sympathy or what a life you must lead. You know, she is who she's meant to be, and actually is such a capable human being who can contribute to things in life. So, but she is a real character.
She sounds awesome. And it's really lovely. So I like to hear anybody talk that lovingly about their child.
Mm-hmm.
But I think so many listeners and people out there who don't have a child with high demand needs will be thinking, God, you know, it sounds really hard and, you know, life must be very tough. And to hear you speaking about your relationship with Lois so positively, I think is really powerful.
Mm-hmm. I think so as well. And also it's okay that you, if you don't always feel like that. So, you know, in terms of if there are parents starting off on this journey, I'd really like to get across that your child is so capable, is going to be so capable of great things, but it's okay to say this is also really hard. Like, you can absolutely champion your child, but also acknowledge those struggles, because this is daily life. It is hard. You know, if I haven't slept all night because she's been up 5 or 6 times, you know, it can be hard. It's really hard when, you know, she is so upset because we can't understand what she's asking for, you know, those kinds of things. Yes, it is hard, but there is nothing better than being her mum, and obviously in Rory's mum as well. It really, it is going to be okay. You know, if you are starting off on this journey, it really is going to be a wonderfully challenging journey that you will just see your child, you know, progress, and there isn't anything more wonderful.
So in terms of schooling, Lois was diagnosed really young, so she had the one-to-one at nursery. Did she then go into a specialist provision?
She did, yes. So it was always very clear to us as parents that we that a specialist provision would be appropriate for her. And so yes, so she started at a specialist autism specific specialist school at the age of 4. And again, you know, I almost feel guilty to say that was very smooth sailing, but it was. You know, she got her place, and that's where she started when she was 4. But last year, so just over a year ago, for various reasons, we requested a change of placement. And after a long battle, we got Lois a place at an options autism school, which has been transformational, really.
Wow, tell me this,
Okay.
because I can see the look on your face.
Honestly, it makes me quite emotional. It has been life-changing in the sense of to see my child with limited communication ask to go to school every morning, even on the weekend.
Wow.
Has been amazing. So Lois isn't able to verbalise her emotions, so she can't tell me if she's upset or feeling anxious, or, you know, we look to her behaviour, and we've just seen a huge reduction in challenging behaviour. She's so much calmer. I think as well the benefits of working in partnership with staff, you know, that genuine, so that the staff, that her class team are just amazing, and from literally day one are so aware of her complexities and her demand avoidance and how she communicates, and that 99% of her language is from Peppa Pig, you know, and they really understand that. But I think the difference is they really want to work in partnership with us.
Yeah.
So, you know, obviously the staff there have so much knowledge and so many ideas, but also ask us for ideas as well, that how do they think this will work with Lois, or they might try this. And, you know, that genuine partnership, that we're all working together here in the best interests of Lois. And honestly, I can't really put into words how life-changing it's been. I think it's more the relief of not having to constantly worry. And again, I almost feel guilty here again, because I know the fight for an educational placement is can be so challenging to many parents, and I know how it feels to feel like an environment isn't right for your child. So when you get, you know, that placement and it's working, it is life-changing, genuinely.
And sometimes you don't realise how wrong the placement was until you see them in a new placement.
Yes, exactly. And I think as well, you know, like the wraparound, like speech and language therapy and the occupational therapy and sensory circuits, and like her school is in the most wonderful grounds, you know, a huge sports hall and forest school and immersive rooms, and just to see her thriving there, it is just wonderful. Like you can't put a price on that. You really can't.
You mentioned at the beginning about the diagnosis and how you you have this kind of road that you were travelling on and the road that you expected to be on, and it sort of forks suddenly.
Yes.
And actually, when you find a placement where your child is able to be authentically themselves and they're thriving, suddenly that fork in the road doesn't feel quite so scary, does it?
Exactly, that's the thing. It's, you know, I'm used to previously staying up till, you know, midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, researching different schools, or, you know, to see what other things might work for her, or, you know, how do you address having, you know, a child that's so upset all the time. And it's really, it's hard to kind of put that into words in terms of not having to worry anymore. And actually, you know, there's so many things we can worry about on this journey. But I think now that, you know, education, it's so core, isn't it, to our children and young people. And I think if you have that one kind of ticked off almost, you can breathe and be like, okay, I'm ready for the next fight, I suppose.
And I suppose that sort of leads me to ask, and I guess it's a bit early to say she's only 9, but what are your hopes for Lois? What do you see in her future?
I think the future, or to talk about the future when you have an autistic child with high support needs, is absolutely terrifying. It can consume you if you let it. You know, really, what happens after the EHCP that you fought for, you know, for so long, 19, 25, what happens then? What happens in her future? You know, will she live an independent life? Will she get married? Will she have children? And really that absolutely terrifying question of what happens when I'm not here, and having to think about wills and trusts and deputyship, and how she would manage without me and my husband. What I quickly realised was my hopes and dreams aren't necessarily Lois's hopes and dreams. So actually, I hoped, you know, as perhaps many parents would, I anticipated that she would get married, that she would have children, that eventually she would fly the nest. But actually, are they really Lois's hopes? Actually, I think Lois probably wants to be happy and safe, potentially with Pepper, you know, in however many years, I don't know. So I think I have definitely reevaluated my kind of hopes for Lois. So I believe she will be able to live a semi-independent life, hopefully doing activities that she enjoys. And I can do that. I can support her to do that. So I think if there can be a tendency to potentially get kind of bogged down in the future, and those feelings are absolutely valid. So definitely, you know, we have to acknowledge that those are things that we will think about. But I think if you let them consume the present, that's not great. And I know it's easier said than done. But, you know, if I'm feeling particularly worried about the future, my husband will always say, but remember when she was diagnosed and you couldn't envisage who she would be in 7 years' time. And now look at the amazing child she is. I think it's really important that, you know, I don't know how she will be in 7 years' time, or 17 years, or 70 years. But I know that I can help her prepare for her future now, whatever that looks like. And I think it's never too early to focus on developing independent skills, you know, whatever they look like. So Lois might not be able to fully get herself dressed at the moment, but she can, put her legs in her trousers, that kind of thing.
So celebrating the little wins as
well.
Absolutely.
I think they're so important. They become huge to us, don't they? That those little steps of progress, no matter how small, are really, really important. So we focused a lot on like medical appointments and getting Lois used to doctor's visits, hospital visits, and dentists and things.
How does she cope with those?
So she used to not be able to enter the building whatsoever. With the use of visuals, social stories, that kind of thing that Lois really responds very well to, we have now built it up to little steps, essentially. So we would stand outside, but then the next time we would maybe stand in reception. Sometimes we would go when we didn't even have an appointment,
Just to sort of
strange,
desensitise.
Get her kind of used to that. These were places that we could go and it would be okay. And I think really one example of that is up until a few weeks ago, Lois would, at the dentist, she would only stand in the dentist's room, and the dentist would have to crouch down in front of her and have a quick look at her, teeth. To now, a few weeks ago, because we've been building that up and have a really, really understanding dentist as well, she will now sit on the chair, lie back, and say, 3 times.
She's braver than me.
So it's just those little steps of progress that have actually been hugely beneficial to her. Sorry, I'm probably going off on a tangent a little bit, but if Lois hadn't been able to sit in the dentist chair, for example, we wouldn't have noticed that she's got a fractured tooth and needs to have that out, which kind of takes me on to like the challenges of having a child that can't communicate pain and illness.
Oh gosh, of course.
So Lois, if you were to see Lois, she would appear as verbal. So I always call her verbal-ish. And what I mean by verbal-ish is she speaks, but most of it is from Pepper. So most of it is just echolalia.
Yeah.
And so that means that she often presents as understanding more language than she actually does. But in terms of pain and illness, Lois can't yet verbalise if she's not feeling very well or if she's hurt herself. And that honestly is so heartbreaking because, like I said earlier, she's had a thyroid condition for a long period of time. I've got the same thyroid condition, and we didn't realise that she had that because she wasn't able to verbalise that she'd been feeling a bit tired. She'd been feeling quite tired, quite unwell. So, I know with that condition that if it's not, if you don't have medication for that, you feel quite poorly, you feel very rough. So obviously Lois had probably been feeling like that, but hadn't been able to verbalise that. And it was only via a blood test that she needed for something separate that we noticed that. And another example of that is a few years ago, she broke her leg and tried to walk round on her broken leg because she didn't have the words to tell us that she'd fallen awkwardly on a trampoline. That's really hard to take as a parent, that, if your child isn't able to verbalise whether they're feeling sad or angry or unwell, or just, they've got a headache. So that makes you, as a parent, be a real detective. Any subtle change in Lois's behaviour, myself and my husband will be on it. We'll think, is she a little bit more lethargic than normal? Is she, not eating as much? And obviously that's so different to Rory, who will just say, Mum,
my tummy hurts.
My tummy hurts. I don't want to go to school today. My tummy hurts. And you can talk that through. That's a real challenge.
If you were to say to Lois, if you were to sort of recognise that something wasn't quite right, would you respond to sort of signals? You know, if you were to sort of touch your face or your ear, would she be able to
No, she wouldn't. She would generally just say Lois is happy, Lois is happy. And so we, like, over the years, we've realised that to her, happy is what she thinks she's meant to be, and so anything other than happy is wrong, if that makes sense. So even if Lois was being sick, for example, she would say Lois is happy.
Oh, bless
You know,
her.
if we said, oh, is it poorly knee or poorly tummy, she would say Lois is happy. So like I said, you know, it's being a detective and hoping for the best as well. And I suppose that's why those visits to, you know, GPs, dentists are super important, and why those subtle cues from parents like us are really important as well.
And I think the messaging here is that, kind of for anybody listening as well, is if your child doesn't respond well to a medical setting, if they're very resistant to it, it's not to say, well, they can't go to the doctors. It's to just gradually build up their tolerance to it. Mm-hmm. And you can do that without, you know, hurting them, harming them. It can be done very, very subtly.
Yes.
And I think patience, like so much patience. You must be a saint.
I mean, I don't know how I have the amount of patience that I do. I think you become the parent that your children need you to be, rather than the parent you necessarily thought you would be.
Oh, you mean that perfect parent that we all
yes,
were before we
yeah,
had children?
that one that we all hear about on social media. But yes, but it's more that I think sometimes there's a danger that perhaps people think that Lois rules the roost, or, you know, you're accommodating her too much, when I see it as every child has the right to have appropriate adjustments for them. You know, we adjust our life for things for Rory, and he's neurotypical. Why should that be any different? But I do think, yes, having the patience and the persistence to carry on, you know, chipping away at these small tasks, these small skills. And, you know, I'm not saying it's easy, taking your child to a hospital or a GP. You know, you hear us before you see us. But I think, you know, the difference there is professionals that actually understand that. And, you know, we've met so many professionals along the way, and so many of them really want to help, you know, really want to do whatever they can to make that.
Makes such a difference.
It really does, honestly. I think, you know, to walk into, you know, for example, a hospital or, you know, a different setting, and then firstly have read the notes that Lois is autistic and may have complex needs and may not communicate in via speech. I think that's really helpful, that you're not going in blind. But when they say, you know, what can we do to help? What can we do to make this experience better? It goes such a long way. It really does.
So, Karen, holidays, family holidays. We get to the summer, you see all these pictures of families off to Disney World and the beach.
No, we shouldn't say that. Oh, we went to Disney
Did you
World.
go to Disney World? Right, come on, let's hear all about it. How was it?
Okay, so up until this year, holidays were very restricted, and that was because Lois really thrives on her routine. We have quite a very rigid routine each week, because that's what makes Lois feel safe. But we decided that we thought Lois was ready for a bigger holiday, I suppose. This is because, you know, alongside her huge interest of Peppa Pig, she's also a real adrenaline junkie. So she absolutely loves roller coasters. Like, just you would not believe. Like, she's honestly, it's her.
Do you though?
I've learned
you do
to
now.
Yeah, I have no choice. So we were like, well, so my husband and I were aware that actually we are huge lovers of Disney World, of Florida. It's where we went for our honeymoon, and we envisaged that we would take our children every year, but that's impossible because it's too expensive. But anyway,
we went. Sure, I can confirm that.
We envisaged that this was somewhere we wanted to take our children. When Lois was diagnosed, obviously we thought that is going to be more challenging. So we stuck to kind of Centre Parks holidays, for example, which, you know, are great because lodges look the same, you know, all the site, the swimming pool and the site all looks the same. But we thought, no, we think Lois is ready now. We think we can do this. So the trip to Florida, it was honestly 5 years planning, like genuinely.
It's like a military operation.
Honestly, I can't, like, I'm not joking when I say we had a suitcase full of visuals. So every single ride we were going to go on, you know, in what order, when nappy changes would take place, when we were going to eat, you know, all of that, what would happen in the airports, all of that kind of thing. So we had a suitcase of visuals, we had a suitcase of safe foods. So Lois has a very restricted diet. And honestly, it was the best trip ever. It was just magical to think we finally got here. But it was exhausting. It was exhausting because the heat, she was out of routine. It was a very different holiday to Florida that probably lots of other families would take. You know, lots of sensory breaks, lots of downtime for regulation. So I think these things are possible.
You just need to plan for 5 years.
Yeah, yes.
And Disney's got quite good accommodations as well. You have to apply before you go, don't you?
Yes.
So did you find that she was sort of well catered for within the park?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. There was a lot of understanding there. And again, you know, as I've said, it's very obvious very, very quickly that Lois behaves differently. She is very vocal about whether, you know, she is going to do something or not. She has real challenges with, you know, queuing and things, which is something we're working on. You know, I'm not saying she can't queue. I'm saying that there are challenges there. But yes, Disney World was very accommodating. Yeah.
And actually, and please don't feel you have to answer this, but I'm thinking about the flight and the fact that you've got a 9-year-old in nappies and those aeroplane toilets.
Yes.
How did you manage that?
Yes. So with great difficulty. So we flew, and the cabin crew were amazing. So Lois had the sunflower lanyard, you know, just pop it on, just you know, yeah. So she had that. Really accommodating through like security and things. So we went to Manchester Airport, and you know, you have to stand on these shapes, you know, footprints on the floor now and again. Obviously Lois couldn't do that, so they were really accommodating with that. But yeah, on the flight the cabin crew were aware, and actually they directed us to one of the toilets on the flight that they can remove basically the wall into not so she's like not so the whole plane can see you, but just it makes the space more accommodating for changing, you know, larger children. And yes, it was, you know, it's thinking about those kinds of things, and it's thinking about that when you are, you know, going on days out, that, you know, yes, there's been progress for changing places, toilets, but they aren't, you know, available everywhere. So we managed that on the flight, but that's obviously a challenge in day-to-day life, really.
So Karen, you've talked really, really eloquently and really beautifully about Lois, but I'm wondering how parenting her has changed you as a person, because I kind of think there's no way it can't have done.
Yeah, I think it's, you know, it's definitely changed me as a person. And my husband as well. So I think we don't worry about what we would call trivial things in life. We don't sweat the small stuff, I suppose, because when you have a child who often finds life so challenging that you really don't have time to worry about the little things. It really does. That perspective absolutely is so crucial. I think it's, you know, like we've said earlier, it's definitely given me more patience. It has wanted me to fight for her, because, you know, she has as much to give in life than other children. So it's definitely changed me as a person. I think it's changed me for the better. I'm definitely a more forgiving person, a more patient person. And yeah, I definitely have Lois to thank for that.
I found it slowed me down a bit. You know, I wasn't running full pelt at everything anymore. You
Yes.
sort of slow down to their pace a little bit.
Yeah.
And in the time since Lois was diagnosed, obviously from a 2-year-old to a 9-year-old, she's going to look very different. Do you find that people react differently now she's older?
Absolutely. So Lois, as I've mentioned, has autism and significant learning difficulties. She has real challenges with her emotional regulation, and that often leads to incredibly challenging behaviour. And, you know, as I said at the beginning, that Lois is unapologetically herself. There is no kind of masking or kind of keeping things bottled up until we get home. It's wherever we are, Lois will, you know, share how she is feeling, and that often, if she's feeling overwhelmed or if she just doesn't want to be somewhere, she will throw herself on the floor. She will kick and scream and scratch and shout and hit. And society is not as forgiving of a 9-year-old that does, you know, that displays those behaviours compared to, for example, a 2-year-old toddler. That can be really hard to take. I do think you develop a thick skin very quickly. Now, you know, if she is really struggling, I think you are so in tune with your child that you kind of block out everything else that's going on. Rory, if he's with me and Lois is perhaps having a meltdown and is being quite vocal and quite shouty and people might be watching, he will just stand and wave at people.
Does he? What a cool kid.
Like, yes, look at, yeah, this is my sister.
Does it make you angry ever? Do you ever lose it with people?
I probably did in the early years, like as in like maybe kind of when she was around 5 or 6.
I used to do the, you know, my kid's autistic, what's your problem? Kind of thing.
I used to be kind of ready, like ready for the fight, you know.
But then you feel like, again, like you're in that constant fight or flight. You're braced, waiting for the next confrontation.
Exactly, absolutely. So I've definitely felt those feelings of anger, of frustration that, you know, she may not match society's idea of a neurotypical 9-year-old child, but she has complex needs here. She's really struggling in this situation. Yeah, like, come on, you know. So definitely those feelings have been there. Now it's just I'm so focused on her that, you know, it's different, but no, that being said, we are generally found at autism specific sessions or SEND specific sessions, so, you know, trampoline parks, that kind of thing. We as a family feel much more comfortable in those kinds of environments, and that's not, you know, that's not because she needs the lights down low or the noise
it's the
off.
fear of judgment.
It absolutely is. That is exactly it. That I can't guarantee that a child might not run up to her and say something and she wouldn't know what was happening, and so she would, you know, scratch or push, because that's her way of communication if something isn't working for her. So we definitely feel more comfortable at SEND specific sessions, and it does kind of, you know, limit your opportunities as a family, I suppose. So I don't know, why are the sessions always at 9 o'clock in the morning or 6 o'clock at night? You know, we struggle to get our children up. Come on. So that is different. Is society developing more understanding? I would hope so. But I don't know if it's just I don't notice it anymore, because I really don't care what people think about. I don't care.
You're being more Lois.
Yeah, there we go. That's what she's taught me, that actually it doesn't matter what other people think about you. If you are authentically yourself, then that's all that matters. So, but it's definitely different. It's definitely there.
So, Karen, it's been really, really incredible to talk to you today, and I really mean that, because I don't have the experiences that you have, much like you may not have the experiences I have, and I think sharing these stories is probably the greatest way to gaining better understanding and a better future for Lois and children like her. Is that the reason that you wanted to come on and sort of advocate for her in this way?
Yes, so definitely. Obviously, I've listened to all of the previous episodes of the podcast, and it was really great to hear, you know, all of those different experiences and different perspectives. I think what I really wanted to share was my experience of being a parent of an autistic child with higher support needs, I suppose, which may be very different to parents of autistic children that perhaps don't have that level of support needs. And I think it's really important that we are talking about different experiences here. It's not easier or harder to have, you know, an autistic child with different support needs. It's, you know, it's not a contest here. It's actually just different. And, you know, these are my experiences, my family's experiences. I don't kind of profess to talk for all parents of autistic children with high support needs, but I do hope that some of this will resonate with parents, that it is hard, but our children make it worth it. You know, it's just a different type of family life, I suppose. So I think it was really important to, you know, it's important to share as many voices as we can, I think. And definitely, you know, autistic children with high support needs, we need to share those stories as well. And also, you know, for, like I said, not for pity or for sympathy, but for understanding, for understanding our journey and the journey of families like ours, but also that there is so much support out there. There really is. Like, there are other people that feel the way that you do, and you just have to reach out for that support. You know, it is there.
Where have you found that? Is there support groups online and things like that?
Yes, so I think, you know, social media can be really helpful in terms of finding people who understand the path that you are on, so they can be, you know, I think it's really important that they're neurodivergent affirming groups, really truly embracing their autistic children and recognising them for the people that they are. So definitely social media groups, you know, Facebook groups, national groups, but also local Facebook groups as well. So I definitely look to social media, or certainly did a few years ago, for kind of support along the way. Also, there's obviously, you know, lots of advocacy groups and organisations for education, or, you know, health, social care, various medical conditions and things. And I do think probably the most important thing, though, is word of mouth.
Yeah.
So I didn't find our council's website particularly easy to navigate. I found that actually parents know more. So kind of seeking out other parents who have perhaps...
It's finding your tribe, isn't it?
It is. And it's interesting you say that, because your tribe can be parents, like fellow parents of autistic children. But also they don't have to just be, you know, you don't have to just have friends who are parents of autistic children. So actually I think you seek out people who are neurodivergent affirming themselves, who are empathetic to the situation that you're in, even if they don't have direct experience. So definitely find your tribe is really important.
Thanks, Karen. Once again, thank you so much for coming on today. It's been amazing to hear about Lois. She sounds like an incredible young woman, and I wish you all the best of luck for the future.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you.
And for anybody else who's listening out there and would like to know more, you can find out some facts and resources at Options Autism's website. Also, give us a follow on social media. But for now, take care. I'll be back with you next time.